Hello, this is Grandma Lorie's Bible Stories. Today, Jacob escapes Laban and returns to the promised land of his fathers. Do you remember that Jacob, the son of Isaac, married his uncle Laban's two daughters, Rachel and Leah, plus their two handmaidens? So now Jacob had 4 wives and 12 children. Through all these years, Jacob had labored long and hard for his father-in-law Laban and got no pay except food and housing for his big family. Now, Jacob was very, very good at increasing the size of all of Laban's animal herds. Because Jacob was so expert, Laban got extremely rich. But finally, Jacob wanted to get away from Laban, treating him practically like a slave, and go back to his homeland with his huge family. But of course, Laban didn't want Jacob to go. The two men had all kinds of arguments and tests and trials, and finally, Laban agreed to divide his flocks and herds equally with Jacob. Now at last, God said to Jacob, "It's time for you to go home with all your wealth and family. I shall help you and protect you." Once God had spoken, Jacob knew he must obey God, not his father-in-law. First, Jacob talked to his wives about it. After all, they loved their father. Or did they? He reminded Rachel and Leah of all the times Laban had cheated them and him. He asked, "Well, my dears, what do you think of the Lord's command to go home?" "Are you kidding?" they both cried. "Laban may be our father, but we are sick to death of his cheating you." Yes, we're plenty ready to get out of this city and away from our awful family." Rachel said, "We don't know why you've stayed here so long, Jacob. When you married us, our father was supposed to give you our dowry money. That money was meant to be yours for marrying us. Every bride must have a dowry to give her husband, but our cheating father did not give our dowries to you. Instead, he spent them all on himself." Leah went on, "Yes, that money was supposed to be our insurance to take care of us and our children in case you died. And he never gave you or us 1 copper coin that he owed for our dowry. We are furious with him. He does not love us. He sold us like slaves with no dowry. We will gladly leave him, Jacob. We must." Rachel added, "But Jacob, we can't let him know we're leaving. He will find some way to trap us here, as he has before. He might even kill you to keep us and all your herds for himself. We will have to sneak away." Listen, Jacob, I know that next week he's going to the farthest pasture to shear the sheep. It will take him more than a week. That would be a perfect time for us to get away." Jacob agreed. "You're both right." So all the families secretly began to pack their belongings. Then Rachel did something extremely sneaky because it would hurt her father's wicked heart. She didn't tell anybody what she did, not even Jacob. You see, Laban, who was supposed to believe in the true God, also kept little idol statues in a special place, and there he worshipped them and prayed to them. That was so against God's law, and Laban knew it. Idols were often made of silver or gold. Laban's idols might even have had valuable jewels attached, but they were his most precious possessions, next to his flocks and herds and money. He loved those idols even more than he loved his daughters or his grandchildren. And Rachel knew right where her father kept them. So after Laban went off to shear his sheep, Rachel sneaked over to his house at night, grabbed those idols, and carried them off to hide them in the saddlebags of the camel she was going to ride on when they escaped. Everyone packed up in secret and was ready to leave the next morning. The shepherds surrounded the herds with their well-trained sheepdogs and began to walk the animals to the south. Jacob led the caravan of wives and children, mounted on the biggest, best camel of all. Rachel mounted her own camel with that saddlebag full of stolen idols, resting underneath two nice soft sheepskins, and she was sitting right on top of them. Nobody knew that as the massive group got underway, those statues were with Rachel. Everyone sang as they left, certain that life would be better in the wonderful new promised land Jacob had described to them. About 3 days later, somebody told Laban that Jacob had taken his family, his servants, his flocks, and all his own wealth, and had left in secret. What do you think greedy Laban did when he heard that? Right. Laban saddled his fastest horses and took a bunch of his men to catch Jacob. Less than 2 weeks had passed since Jacob and his family had left. They were camped in tents when Laban nearly caught up to them, eager to kill Jacob and take all Jacob's stuff for himself. But the Lord's voice came to Laban in a dream that night and said, "I warn you not to harm Jacob or his family. Speak to him kindly, neither good nor bad." That must have shaken Laban, because when he came to Jacob's camp, he spoke much more gently than he wanted to. "You have taken my daughters and my grandchildren, and didn't even let me throw you a party or kiss them goodbye. And what's worse, you have stolen my idols." Jacob was astonished. "No, Laban, I would never touch your idols. You can search all my baggage, everyone's tents, everywhere. If you find those idols, the thief will be killed." So Laban and his men searched everywhere. When Laban got to Rachel's tent, he searched every nook and cranny. Rachel was sitting on her camel's saddle where the idols were hidden. Laban said, "Rachel, you must get up so I can search your saddlebags." Rachel looked at him with big eyes and said, "Oh, Father, I'm sorry, I cannot get up. I am having my monthly time as a woman, and I'm having terrible stomach cramps. Please don't make me get up." Now, most men are very embarrassed when women talk about their monthly periods. Laban just blushed and left the tent. The idols were not found, so Laban had to admit defeat. He made Jacob promise to be kind to his daughters and never take any more wives than he already had. Then he kissed his daughters and grandchildren goodbye and went back home. Now Jacob had to face a new worry, meeting the brother who had promised to kill him for stealing the birthright blessing so many years ago. Was Jacob leading his precious family into a death trap? Jacob now had those 4 wives, 11 sons, and 1 daughter, each of whom he loved more than his own life. Was he making a huge mistake? No. The Lord had told him to go home to the promised land of Abraham, and Jacob always obeyed. He always had. In Jacob's great caravan, there were hundreds of people and thousands of animals. Jacob prayed, "Please, Lord, let us be safe. Will Esau be waiting to ambush us? Will he bring an army to kill us all? Was I only imagining your voice telling me to go back to the land of my fathers? I must believe you. I must." Day after day, he prayed to the Lord for help and protection in the promised land. Jacob prayed, "Esau swore he would kill me, Lord. He promised he would never let me live another day in his sight, even though I let him have all of our father's riches. Oh, Lord, I just wanted him to love me as I loved him, admire me as I admired him. I wanted Father to love me as he loved Esau. But me being righteous and obeying thee was not enough for Father. I had to be big and strong and mighty hunter like Esau." Jacob remembered wearing his brother's clothes so that his blind father would not smell Esau, not Jacob, when he asked for the birthright blessings, and how his mother had sewn kid-skin coverings for his arms and his neck so he would feel hairy like Esau. And all this deception was so that he, Jacob, could get the richest blessing of the birthright, which was the priesthood of God, a blessing Esau didn't care about anyway. A voice spoke at his right, startling him. Rachel had walked her camel up near his and looked at him with puzzlement. "What's wrong, Jacob? Your face looks like a thundercloud, and you haven't spoken to anyone for hours. I can tell you're praying. I've watched your lips move, and your eyes plead with heaven. My father has left us alone for weeks, so you can't be concerned about him. Please, can't you tell me what's wrong, Jacob?" Jacob shook his head. He did not want to worry his most dearly beloved Rachel. Fortunately, just at that moment, he saw men in white robes in the distance walking toward his caravan, and quickly ignored Rachel's question.
"Behold, my love, men are coming toward us, and they look as if they are seeking me. Our people can use a short rest. Please take word back to the caravan master to lead everyone into the shade of that tall hill and set up camp for the night."
The few men in white robes soon met Jacob. Immediately the Spirit of the Lord told Jacob the men were angels, messengers from God. The holy men gave Jacob a very short message.
"Jacob, you are favored of God. He watches over you. We bring you this message from him. Send servants ahead of you to tell your brother Esau that you are coming with your wives and children and all your flocks and herds, and send Esau a gift as well to soften his heart."
Jacob shook his head as if he had not understood and asked, "But what about a promise of safety? Surely God sent you with a promise of safety for us. Nothing matters more to me than my family. Isn't there a promise from God?" Jacob was almost frantic. The men stood.
"We have delivered our message from God, and now we must leave."
Without waiting for anything, the men left. Jacob grabbed his hair. "No promise. The Lord gave me no promise." But Jacob had learned that he must trust anything the Lord said. So the next morning he told his own messengers to ride ahead toward his brother Esau. They were to tell Esau that Jacob was now very, very rich, with all kinds of flocks and herds and servants, and that when they met, Jacob would give Esau a big present from all that he owned. Jacob hoped that would make Esau feel kind toward him. When Jacob's messengers returned, they said, "We have delivered your messages. We don't know how Esau felt about it, but we could tell that Esau has decided to come and meet you. He brings 400 men with him, all with bows and spears, so we hurried back here to warn you." Well, to Jacob, 400 men with weapons sounded more like an army than a welcoming committee. It did not sound like Esau was coming peacefully at all. Then Jacob prayed long and hard. "Oh, Lord, I know nothing compared to thee. You gave me all my wealth and family, but remember, Lord, that I can't have grandchildren, as many as the sands of the seashore, if Esau kills me and my children." After he prayed, he had an inspiration. "I know. Why not give Esau the huge present right now, instead of waiting until he arrives with his army?" So from all his herds and flocks, he separated out a huge gift to give to Esau. 440 goats and sheep, both males and females, 30 milking camels with their babies, and 20 donkeys with their babies. You see, camel and donkey milk was very valuable, so it was important that all the camels and donkeys had babies to feed. Then Jacob included herdsmen, shepherds, and servants with the gift of all those animals. Man, that would make anybody rich. In today's money, that gift would be worth more than $250,000. But Jacob had become very, very rich, so that was only part of all he owned. Jacob said to the men delivering these herds to Esau, "String out your herds a little, so they will arrive one by one. That should give Esau time to soften his heart. Tell Esau these are all presents from me to him,
and that I really, truly hope he has forgiven me for the past. Tell him I am following behind these gifts in person."
That night in his camp with all the other people and animals, Jacob tried to sleep, but he couldn't. He was still worried. Around midnight, he made everybody else get up and hide in the hills. He stayed behind alone to pray. Suddenly, another messenger showed up, glowing white. An angel, of course. The glowing man asked,
"Why are you here alone, Jacob? Don't you trust God, who promised you he would be with you and multiply you?"
Jacob began to argue with the angels because God had not promised to protect them. The angel tried to turn away, but Jacob grabbed the angel, which tried to pull away from him. Now, I have to stop for a minute and tell you something important and true that you need to know. The word angel means messenger. Sometimes an angel is a spirit you could not feel, but sometimes it is a very holy man who is as alive as you are, but has been preserved by God to carry messages. If Jacob was able to grab this angel, it was not a spirit, okay? I just thought I should clear that up. Anyway, Jacob wanted an ironclad promise from this angel that Esau would not hurt his family or his people, and he wanted that promise from God. He was determined not to let the angel go until he had that promise. As the angel tried to pull loose, the two men began to wrestle fiercely with each other. Jacob was very strong, but the angel was strong too. When the angel couldn't get loose from Jacob, he touched Jacob in the hip joint and pulled Jacob's thigh bone right out of his hip. Now, can a regular man do that? No. Wow! That hurt. Jacob screamed with pain, but still he hung on to the messenger. The angel said strongly,
"You have to let me go. It's almost dawn."
But Jacob cried in agony, "I won't let you go unless you give me an absolute sure promise from the Lord."
"All right, I will," said the angel, relaxing at last. "First, tell me your name,"
as if he didn't know it.
"I am called Jacob,"
he panted. The visitor looked at him keenly.
"Well, you will not be called Jacob any more. From now on, you are named Israel, for you are a prince before God who has great power, and this is your blessing from God. You, all of your family, all of your people and animals will be safe. That is because you would not give up, even when I hurt your hip so badly." Jacob asked, "What's your name?" The angel said, "I will not tell you my name, but now you have the promised blessing you demanded from God." And then the angel vanished. Jacob's mouth dropped open. "I got the blessing. I got my promise, and now I know everything will be all right." He paused and thought, could I have been wrestling with the Lord himself? Well, the answer to that was no, because the Lord didn't have a body yet. Jacob limped all the way back to camp because his hip hurt so dreadfully. For the rest of his life, he always limped after that, but his limp always reminded him of the Lord's faithful promises. Soon it was daytime. The rest of Jacob's caravan joined him. Soon Jacob could see a big dust cloud approaching from far off. Jacob fell to his knees. Oh no, was this Esau's army who would try to kill him? But Jacob now had the Lord's promise, and clever Jacob had another plan. By now, Esau would have received Jacob's huge, expensive present of animals and servants. That would thrill Esau's love of money and gifts. Next, Jacob would try to soften Esau's heart by presenting a long string of Jacob's own wives and children.
Jacob organized his wives with their children in groups and put them all at the very front of all of the other people and animals. Then he mounted a donkey and rode at the very front of all of his wives and children to lead them toward Esau's army. And then, of course, he had to ride. He couldn't walk, not with a dislocated hip. By the way, did you know that riding a donkey in those days meant peace? Jacob wanted to show his brother that he came in peace. Jacob also knew that even his angry brother would never kill women and children. Seeing them would make Esau's heart feel loving. When Jacob, who was now named Israel, got close to his brother, he got down and bowed to the ground in front of Esau 7 times. Then he limped forward with all his trust in the Lord's promise. He did not have to wait long to see what Esau would do. His big, still hairy brother ran forward and hugged Jacob, even weeping against his neck in joy. Wow, that was better than the best meeting Jacob could imagine. Then the women and the children came forward. They also bowed to Esau.
"Brother,"
Esau asked,
"who are these lovely women and these beautiful children?"
Jacob smiled and introduced every wife and child, with special pride in beautiful Rachel and their son Joseph. Esau then asked Jacob,
"What are all these animals that came before you? The drovers said they were gifts from you to me. Is that true?"
Jacob bowed yet again.
"Indeed, Esau, they are gifts of peace from our family to yours." "Oh, forget that," said Esau. "I am a rich man now and have herds enough of my own. I don't need yours, too."
But Jacob insisted that Esau keep the gift animals, which did warm Esau's heart. Now Esau knew for sure that his brother had not taken the birthright blessing all those years ago out of greed for their father's wealth. Jacob spoke again to his brother.
"Esau, you see how small many of my children are, and most of the animals recently had babies. Please let us travel gently and slowly back to the land of our fathers. If we rush, I'm afraid many of them will die on the trail." Of course, agreed Esau. "In fact, I will send many of my herdsmen with you to help you on your way."
That night, everyone had a huge party to celebrate the reunion of the brothers. Everyone had a great time and made good friends with each other. Then the next day, Esau and most of his men marched back to their lands with all the gift animals, while Jacob and his group packed up and traveled more slowly. After a few weeks, Jacob's company came near to the city of Shechem, which was not far from Esau's lands. Jacob went to the king of Shechem and bought a massive tract of land for 100 pieces of gold, which was like hundreds of thousands of dollars nowadays. The king was glad to have all that money, and Jacob was glad to have all that land, nice and legal. He would never have to fight the king's men or his brother to keep his newly bought land safe forever. On his new land, Jacob built a gigantic house, big enough for many wives and children. He built sheds and barns for the animals and silos to house the grain he would have to store. He brought along his big tents for when they would have to travel with the herds of animals. Jacob called his new home Succoth. As soon as the buildings were finished, Jacob, now named Israel, built an altar of thanksgiving to show the Lord how grateful he was for blessing his whole family. They would have peace, safety, and happiness at last. That's the end of the story, but there's something to think about. The lesson for us in this story is pretty clear. When we especially need a blessing from the Lord, we must pray with all our hearts, and maybe pray over and over and over for a long time. Then, whether the Lord sends a live messenger or just a peaceful feeling in our hearts, we must trust that the Lord will do whatever is the very best thing for us. I'll see you next time.